As we shared last week, we're starting this morning on a series of just exploring the nature and practice of prayer. Doing this not because I've suddenly mastered it and I have all of these things to tell you, but because I'm kind of a fellow struggler along with you. And I hope that as we go through this series that we can kind of explore together and maybe learn some new things, and maybe it can help us in our understanding of just what prayer is. And we're actually going to start today by the title that I've used is Making the Connection. And that can go in a lot of different ways. And the first way I want us to think in terms of prayer, making the connection, is looking at some different images that for some people represent what prayer is all about. And so when we ask the question, what is prayer? Sometimes it helps to kind of say, well, is it this? Something that we do understand. And we can kind of process and say, okay, is that really, is that the connection we need to make in helping us to understand what prayer is? So we're going to take a few minutes and go through several different images. And we're going to kind of think together. I'm not going to ask for a lot of responses verbally, but I'll kind of lead you in thinking, okay, how does this image suggest some truth about prayer? And even, is that a really good image to represent prayer, or is it a not so good image to represent prayer? I may ask for hands once in a while. We'll see. So pay attention, tune in, and I hope this will be fun. And also maybe a little informative. Bless you. All right, first image. Does anybody see how there could possibly be a connection made between this image of a gumball machine? Do they still exist? In museums, maybe in some grocery store lobbies or something. Can you make any connection between this and prayer? Anybody? You can understand where some people might make a connection. I mean, what's at its most basic, what happens? You put something in and you get something out. Okay. So if we would boil it down, put in your prayer, get what you ask for. Okay? Now, I'm seeing some different expressions there. It's like, well, yeah, when you put it that way, you can see how this would represent prayer to some people, right? And you might even see how, well, it would really be nice if that's what prayer was, right? And maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Or how about this image? All right? Yeah, there's better things to get out of a machine than just gumballs, right? Okay, this is what I would call a little bit more sophisticated, perhaps, a slightly more sophisticated version of the gumball machine. But there are some differences, right? Think about the differences. Do you own what's in the gumball machine before you put your money in? No. Here there's a sense of, okay, there's something in there that belongs to me. All right? And so I'm not actually putting anything in except some form of identification, and I'm taking what belongs to me. Oh, a little subtle twist there. You understand how people can have either of those attitudes about prayer. One is, I'm deserving, I'm earning what's inside by putting something in. The other is, I'm already entitled to it, because somehow I feel like I own that. It belongs to me, and I'm just now taking part of what belongs to me. Okay, well, let's go on. I realize none of you have any clue what this picture is, right? I think the term is a slot machine. You're not supposed to be nodding your heads, okay? I know you've seen movies, you know. So there is a sense of putting something in and getting something out, right? What's different about this? Chance, no guarantee. But I've heard of people who hit the jackpot. That's a term I read somewhere. And maybe if I just keep trying, maybe one of these days I'll get lucky. But at some level, I'm not real sure that there's a whole lot more to it than chance. Okay? Cosmic slot machine. All right. This is not an image of something, but you can read those numbers at least, can't you? 911. That has nothing to do with an attitude towards prayer, does it? All right, I heard one. Mm-hmm. Can I get a little louder? Mm-hmm. Okay. Use only in case of emergency. Does that represent a very common attitude towards what prayer is? Oh, absolutely it does. All right, what else do we have here? Anybody recognize that? Okay, navigation system. I guess that's like your phone or whatever. And what does that represent for us? I mean, basically, tell me how to get where I want to go. Any connection with prayer? Okay, I've seen a little bit of, yeah, maybe. Good connection or bad connection? Yeah, don't commit yourself too much. Yeah, so. I'm sure if you look closely, and I crafted these explanations very carefully, and tell me how to get to where I want to go. No question about, is that a common attitude, right? About prayer? Here's what I want, God. Tell me how to get it. Here's where I want to go. Tell me how to get there, okay? Now I'm tipping my hand a little bit, right? All right. Now this one's a little harder to read. Can anybody read the words there? Our Father which art in heaven, okay? Can you read the second line? How about the third line? Okay. Where are those written? On a blackboard. Okay. So does that make you think of anything? I mean, I know they probably don't even have blackboards in schools anymore. But back when they did, what was usually going on if somebody was writing the same thing multiple times on the blackboard? Oh, interesting. You thought the same thing I did. Penance for messing up, okay? Now, this may seem a little bit strange compared to the others, but you stop and think about it. For some people, prayer is kind of like that. It's like, okay, I've got to do my duty. This is how I get back in God's good graces. This is how I somehow make up for messing up, is to recite these prayers. Okay? Well, there's an interesting one. That has nothing to do with our attitude towards prayer, does it? Well, who is that man behind this ethereal curtain of prayer? Does that represent, is that a good picture of God? Is it a common picture of God as we come to God in prayer? I believe it is. So, which image of all these that we've looked at, and be very careful in your answer, which image accurately reflects the essence of prayer? Just kind of think about your answer. You might want to phone a friend. I'm not sure if even 50-50 is going to help you out today. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I'm not going to make you take the test. I'm just going to scroll through, or Noah's going to scroll through, and we're going to look at them one at a time, and you'll see the answer, whether it's a green check mark or whether it's a red X, okay? Put in your prayer, get what you ask for. Slightly more sophisticated version. Cosmic slot machine. Nah. Use only in case of emergency. No. Tell me how to get where I want to go. No. Penance for messing up. No. The man behind the curtain. No. Say all of them wrong? Well, I think each of them maybe have an element to them that we can say, well, yeah, there is some truth there. There is some connection there, but I want to suggest that they all miss the mark in getting to the essence, getting to the heart of what prayer really is. And here's what I want us to understand this morning, is that understanding prayer begins with understanding a relationship with God and the nature of that relationship. That we don't even begin to talk about the mechanics, about the how-to, about all of this stuff, about what prayer is until we understand that the main connection we need to make in understanding prayer is the connection with God. And there are 4 different images, if you will, that I want us to take home with us, that are not images of what prayer is, so much as they're images of our relationship with God. And that's where we have to begin. To understand the nature of prayer, to understand prayer, we have to begin with understanding God. And it's interesting, all 4 of these are ways that Jesus revealed God through himself. And these are images, these are relationships we understand. And it's not going to be new to you, but I hope you'll hear them in this context. The first one is understanding God as shepherd. That's not new to the New Testament. Where do we first hear of God as shepherd? Or where's the most common scripture that we know of talking about God as shepherd? Psalm 23. And we start, I know that's smaller print there. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. And Jesus picked up that theme in John chapter 10, and he talked about how I am the good shepherd. And the good shepherd, there you go. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and they know me, and I lay down my life for the sheep. This relationship, understanding God as our shepherd, will teach us more about the nature of prayer than these other things that we might look at. The connection we need to make, first and foremost, is a connection where we come to know God as my shepherd. David, who wrote the Psalms, understood he came to know that God knew him personally. And Jesus is trying to teach us that as our shepherd, he knows us. As our shepherd, he loves us. He lays down his life for us. He is committed to what is best for us. And you see how understanding that relationship will shape our prayer. Second image. We need to understand God as our shepherd. We need to understand God as the vine. Now, this may not be as warm and fuzzy as a shepherd and sheep, but this is also equally critical. And understand, none of these images are complete in and of themselves. None of these images tell the whole story. Jesus said in John 15, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. We understand gardening. We understand fruit trees. We understand grapevines. We understand that if you take that branch off, it's going to die. We understand that the life that produces the cluster of grapes on that vine comes from the heart of the vine. It comes from the roots and the main stalk of the vine, and then that life flows out into the branches and ultimately produces that fruit that's hanging on the end of the branch. We understand that this is not just when we think of a shepherd and sheep. There's a lot of truth represented there. The shepherd is providing for the sheep. The shepherd is protecting the sheep. But there's still this significant disconnect between the shepherd and the sheep. There's not exactly life passing between them, is there? Other than just leading them to where they get water and where they can pasture. The vine and the branches. There is an intimate connection there. There is a connection that is life-sustaining. There is a connection that life flows. The song we sang earlier about let your river flow through me. Think of how the water that vine takes up from the ground and through its roots and sends out to the branches. Think of that as the river of God's life flowing from that vine into the branches. There is a life-sustaining connection. There is a transforming connection, being connected to the vine. We understand that. That changes and shapes our understanding of what prayer is. Later on in that same passage, Jesus talks about how he now is calling his disciples friends, not servants. We need to understand God, yes, as shepherd, yes, as vine. We do need to understand him as friend, and Christ gives us permission to understand him as friend. So he specifically says, I no longer call you slaves, because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. You are my friend, since I have told you everything the Father told me. Now, we can just focus on this and have a misconception of our relationship with God. It's not just a buddy relationship. And you can go overboard in each of these images, but it is a biblical concept that God invites us in relationship with him. And there is a sense of friendship that can exist between us and God. Yes, there's dependence on the vine. Yes, there's dependence upon the shepherd to guide us. But there's also friendship. And that informs our understanding of prayer. One more this morning, and this is perhaps most important of all. And that's the image of Father. And I understand this image can be really tricky because our experiences vary. And even at the very best, none of us has had a perfect human father. None of us has been, myself included, a perfect human father. But when we think about what we would long for a father to be, either because we had a good example or because we didn't have a good example, this is the image that Christ gave to us especially. All throughout the Gospels, he's revealing the Father to people, and he's trying to help us understand that we can have a relationship with God where we come to know him as Father, as our Heavenly Father, who's also our shepherd, who's also the vine with which we must be connected, who's also a friend. And so it's no mistake that Jesus began this prayer when he's teaching his disciples and us how to pray by saying, when you pray, this is how you pray. Our Father in heaven. May your name be kept holy. And then moving on through the prayer. It's important. It isn't just, hey, Dad. It says our Father in heaven. Understanding the disconnect, yes, that God is God and we're not. But understanding that he has invited us into relationship with him. Understanding that prayer at its heart is in the context of relationship. With a God who created us, yes. A God who reveals himself as our shepherd. God who reveals himself as the vine to which we must be connected. To have spiritual life. To bear fruit that matters and that lasts. A God who reveals himself as our friend. A God who, perhaps more than any other image, wants us to know him as Father. Now, this is just a starting point. There's a lot more that we're going to explore on this topic of prayer. But I hope this can kind of get your thoughts started and the images we saw that maybe you had some of your attitudes reflected in, that I put a big red X up there and said, no, this is not the heart of what prayer is. Now, if you got some of those wrong, don't feel too badly, because there is that kernel of truth in each one. We understand that. But let's focus in this coming week. Let's focus on the connection we need to make, is not finding the right finding the right image to represent prayer. The real connection we need to make is the connection between us and God, and to make sure that that's in place. The God of this universe invites us to know him as our shepherd. Invites us to follow him as our shepherd. The God of this universe invites us to be connected to him as closely and as dependently as the vine and the branches are connected. He invites us into friendship with him. Invites us to know him as Father. And I hope that expresses the reality that's in your heart. That's the connection that you've made. And if not, I encourage you to seek him, to turn to him, to say yes to him, to his invitation, and begin that relationship today.